President Biden capped his 7.5-hour trip to the Middle East today without meeting in person with Arab leaders. That summit was canceled following the deadly bombing outside a hospital in Gaza. Biden did, however, leave with a deal to get limited humanitarian aid into Gaza and with a warning to Israel not to allow rage over the deadly Hamas attack to consume them. Diana Buttu is a Canadian Palestinian lawyer and a former negotiator with the Palestine Liberation Organization. Diana Buttu, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'd like to start with the U.S. president and his visit to Israel today. He says that based on the evidence that he has seen, Israel is not to blame for what has happened at this hospital in Gaza, though he concedes there are many people in that part of the world who will not believe him, will not believe Israel. What are your thoughts on this moment, this incident, and this visit by this president?
Look, in terms of the bombing of the hospital, it's important to put this in its context. This isn't the first time that Israel has bombed a hospital. They've bombed hospitals. Just yesterday, they also bombed a UN school. They bombed mosques. They bombed churches. They bombed just about everything. And so this is not unusual for Israel's behavior. But more than that, immediately after they bombed the hospital, the person from the Israel Ministry of Defense came out and said that they bombed the hospital. And just before that, we saw a tweet by the Israeli Prime Minister saying that this is a struggle of the children of light versus the children of darkness. So this is not at all surprising that Israel would do this. What is surprising is that people are still questioning whether it is that Israel's doing. Israel has an obligation to protect life. It is the occupier. And instead of abiding by that obligation, it does whatever it wants. Now, when it comes to President Biden, this is because President Biden has given Israel the green light. He has said that he is in lockstep with Israel. And instead of calling for a ceasefire and calling for a halt, calling for international law to be applied, he's instead cheering Israel on. And so his visit here was simply a cheerleader coming to cheer on his favorite team.
Okay, there's a lot there. So you believe Israel did this despite their denials, the evidence that they have released in support of their denials, and the pictures we've seen today that certainly don't bear the resemblance to the other direct, deliberate Israeli attacks we've seen to this point in the conflict. You still believe they did this?
I believe that Israel has bombed many a hospital in the past. I'm not in Gaza. I cannot be a person who attests to it, but I know what Israel has done in the past, and I know what they said immediately before and immediately after.
We saw the protests throughout the Arab world last night in the hours after this, and the condemnation of Israel in the early hours after this incident. Part of the reason the president went there, I know you described him as a cheerleader, but the Americans say he went there to try to de-escalate things and contain it and stop it from spreading into a wider regional conflict. What's your sense of where things stand in terms of the ability to de-escalate things?
I wish he was trying to de-escalate things. I think he's trying to escalate things. Look, there's currently a congressional resolution that is attempting to be passed calling for the president to call for a ceasefire. He's not abiding by it. Just today, the United States exercised its veto in the UN Security Council once again to halt a ceasefire. So he's not at all trying to de-escalate it. I think it's important to question what it is that President Biden is trying to do. Look, the Israeli foreign minister and previous foreign minister have both indicated that their intent is to send Palestinians into the Sinai. That's mass transfer. That's a war crime under international law. And instead of the world stopping this, we see that President Biden is speaking to U.S. capitals around the Arab world, trying to get their support for it. And that's the only thing that he's trying to do. He's not at all trying to de-escalate. I wish that were the case. He has the ability to stop this by simply picking up the phone and telling Prime Minister Netanyahu to stop, but instead he's simply been cheering them on.
Right. Perhaps I phrased that incorrectly. I don't think he's trying to de-escalate necessarily the fight against Hamas in Gaza, though they are urging Israel to not be fueled by their rage and make the mistakes that he says America made after 9/11. But to contain it, I guess, is perhaps the way I should have phrased it, Ms. Buttu, in terms of stopping it from spreading to a conflict that suddenly brings in Hezbollah, brings in all the other players potentially in the region. How worried are you that this could flare out from where it is right now?
I'm worried about me, and I'm worried about the lives of other Palestinians. The Israelis have made it clear that they don't want us in this place, even though we're from here. They've been making it clear for many, many years now, with people saying that the only reason that Palestinians remain is because they didn't finish the job in 1948 when they ethnically cleansed Palestine, leaving Palestinians with only 22% of their homeland. So I am very much worried about what's going to happen. We're already hearing from the foreign ministers talking about pushing Palestinians into the Sinai, into Egypt. We're already hearing and seeing what is happening in the West Bank. And even as I sit talking to you now, there are major protests outside of my office where Israelis are rounding up Palestinians who even express even the slightest bit of sympathy, not for Hamas, but for the people of Gaza. So I'm very worried about what this means for me as an individual. If you look at the broader region, what it means for the region, it's also very troublesome, because what Israel has made clear that it wants is they don't want to see Palestinians. And I think this is where the world needs to step in and to actually come forward and put rules into place. If not, then why have an international legal system if not everybody is going to be forced to abide by it?
I wonder if we could get your thoughts on what's happening in the West Bank. We saw protests there against President Abbas. Some people chanting that they are calling for their support for Hamas. We know Hamas has not had elections in Gaza since 2007. We know it's a similar situation in the West Bank. Where does this leave Palestinian leadership right now? Is President Abbas losing his grip on power?
He should have lost it long ago. Look, we had our presidential elections in 2005 and haven't had presidential elections since. So we were supposed to have them in 2009, they were canceled, and now we're in the year 2023. When it comes to parliamentary elections, they took place in 2006, were supposed to take place 4 years later in 2010, and of course also didn't take place. President Abbas has refused to hold elections and continues to hold on to power in the West Bank, because he doesn't want to cede power. He doesn't want to see a new generation come forward. Now, with everything that's happening here, the question isn't just about Mahmoud Abbas, but it's about what it is that Palestinians are, where it is that our future is. And right now, we don't have anybody who is protecting us. Just so people are aware, Palestine is not a state. The Palestinian Authority is not a state. There's no army. There's no people out there to protect us. All that we have is the ability to plead to the world to protect us and to stop these war crimes. And even that he isn't doing at this point in time. So what we're seeing now is a complete collapse of the Palestinian political system as we know it, because of the fact that he's just sat in power for all of these years and has done absolutely nothing to protect us, to try to make sure that the Palestinians gain their freedom.
So what is the path out of this then? I mean, if there is no legitimacy for President Abbas and Hamas is a designated terrorist organization that Israel says it is intent on wiping out, what is the path forward here?
The path forward is a very simple one. Israel's an occupier. It has obligations as an occupier. It has to finally let Palestinians be free. What does it mean to live under occupation? What Israel saw over the past, just over 12 days ago, was what Palestinians have lived with for the past 56 years. And nobody wants to live without freedom. And it's up to the world, for the world to be pushing Israel to finally let Palestinians be free. We can look at violence and condemn violence, but violence is the symptom. The disease is the denial of freedom. And this is where it's imperative for world leaders to be stepping forward to stop Israel from bombing Palestinians into complete oblivion, and to make sure that Palestinians are finally allowed to be free. This is the only way forward. And we've been saying this for decades. The problem is that nobody's listening.
Just as a final point, Israel said today at the U.S.'s urging that it will allow humanitarian aid into Gaza via Egypt. This comes at the request of President Biden, though it says it's subject to inspections to make sure weapons and military equipment isn't going in. How optimistic are you that this will actually happen? Israel is insistent, no aid from its land, it has to come in from Egypt.
See, this is what it means to live under military rule, under occupation. Israel controls the water, the food, the electricity, and the fuel supplies into Gaza. That's what it means to live under occupation. They don't allow it in from Egypt. Now, in terms of what the Israeli cabinet just said, is they've reiterated that they will not allow any of those supplies to come in, and they will only allow limited supplies to come in through Egypt, which is a very circuitous route going through the Sinai, and only for the southern part of the Gaza Strip. In other words, what they're trying to do is evacuate the entire northern part of the Gaza Strip, which is where 1.1 million Palestinians live, force them to flee down to the south to be able to drink water and to get food. This is a war crime. And this is why we've been hearing organizations such as the Norwegian Refugee Council, such as the United Nations, all be pushing and saying to Israel that they cannot do this. There is no safe way to be forcing people to evacuate down to the south. And by dangling some pieces of food or some water in front of them, this is again reprehensible and must be stopped. That we must recognize Palestinians as human beings, and give them the same treatment that we give to people all around the world when they're facing situations of war. Not turn off the water, not turn off the electricity, not turn off the fuel supply, and not allow food and medicine to get into the Gaza Strip. That's just cruel, and it's a war crime.
Diana Buttu, I want to thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.